So this sex education debate has been continuing over the break with Chris Sakabusi and Dawn Neeson. Chris, what do you think from what you heard before the break?
Yeah, I think it's we've gone too far. It's too much. It's a very, very simple sex education for children at schools needs to be very, very basic. If a boy and a girl lay together, get intimate, babies can happen, venereal diseases can happen, and leave it at that. The idea that you're showing different shapes and sizes, and it's too much for me.
Dawn?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Chris. But obviously, my sex education obviously consisted of our mum giving me a book with sort of like cartoons in it. And I looked at it and Eamonn, I said, "Mum, you don't do that with dads, do you?" And it was like fairly horrifying. So, yeah, I think the basics need to be there, but a lot of the other stuff that they're telling them these days...
I remember I was 16 at school and my mother was pregnant and I couldn't have the idea that anybody in school would actually think my mother was doing it.
Doing that?
Absolutely. And I thought, please don't turn up at school, please don't go. You know, so there'd be the school play and whatever. Mum would say, when is that happening? They don't want parents there, Mum. That's not happening. But she was 48 at the time. And
go girl.
Maybe she needed one of those videos at that stage. Right, Chris, what have we got to say about Jeremy Hunt? Thankfully, he says, "I'm blessed my cancer was caught quickly." This was skin cancer. Front page of the Mail today.
Yeah, I mean, what I liked about this picture is Jeremy Hunt, for me, and I have not been with, comes across as very stiff and technocratic and sort of asinine. And yet, on this picture, you see the human side of Jeremy Hunt. He's laid back, pair of jeans, open-neck shirt. His wife has got a jeans jacket, and being very, very personal. It's not something that I would actually think Jeremy Hunt would talk about. And he said, look, he's blessed. He's found his cancer early. Both his parents have gone through cancer. His brother has had a bout of cancer, and he recognises how important it is to catch things early. Now, he is also a child of the 60s and 70s, where where white guys were encouraged to go out in the sunshine. You know, sunbeds, sunshine,
oil,
really
cooking oil,
yeah, exactly.
Any type of oil, and tin foil. There was also this trick that you would lie on tin
foil. To reflect it up, wouldn't you?
Reflect it around your body.
Just imagine that sort of stuff we were doing in the 60s and 70s. You know, it was great to be brown and look great, and now we're getting repercussions because it's the 55-year-old pluses who are getting the particular cancer he's got, which is skin cancer. So he's doing a public service, letting everyone know, and he's seeing a gentler, softer side of him. And what I loved also about the article, he said that, cancer's a word you hear a lot, and then one day it's actually you. And I've had that experience a couple of times, well over it, but when you're dealing with it yourself, it's never as a joke, but then the reality of your mortality and the reality of the disease hits you.
Yeah, and look, it's really interesting hearing him talking about, I think, a naval admiral, his father, and Lady Hunt, and them having fought it and tragically died from cancer. But here's the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and there have to be questions, don't there, about, well, are you adequately funding the NHS to be able to cope with cancer? We know that we're actually lagging behind Europe on this particular issue. We're pleased to hear that you've done well out of an early diagnosis from the NHS. Lots of people haven't. Is this time to start that
especially
conversation?
seeing as you shut the NHS down during COVID and it became the National COVID Service. The one thing I would say about this, as a newspaper journalist, is I don't understand why they've done it so big on page one and not mentioned the story of the day, which is the wildfires happening in Greece. It's a strange decision. I'm suspicious. I hate to say it. I think it's great to get the message out there about getting checkups and tackling cancer. But I just think there's something else going on as to why they've done this story today and ignored the main news story of the day.
Well, I guess it's because of that, an exclusive scoop for them. Their reporters got the sit-down interview with him. Yeah, on the front page.
It's a strange decision by the Mail, but it's good to get the message out there, as Chris said.
Dawn, should we talk about Gary Lineker? Des Lynam's got a thing or two to say about him this morning on the front of the Telegraph.
This is on the front of the Telegraph and a huge page inside. Lineker should get on with footy and forget politics, declares Des Lynam. Now, Des Lynam was the Gary Lineker of his day. He presented Match of the Day back in 1988 to 99, I think it was. And he's giving an interview saying, you know, Gary Lineker to really just concentrate on the day job and forget all the politics. As we know, you know, Lineker somewhat hypocritically went out to the World Cup in Qatar and said, oh, the human rights issues out here are appalling, but here's me earning loads of money. The BBC paying £1.3 million a year for his job. And he's also very, very vocal on all sorts of politics. He supports Just Stop Oil, which is fine, absolutely his right. And also he has spoken out on politics, and he was the one that accused the Tory party of sounding at one point like the Nazi party, didn't he, with the language that was being used around the immigration situation. So, I mean, to be fair to Des Lynam, he is speaking out, that's his opinion, and Gary Lineker, to be fair to Gary Lineker, has said, look, we're all entitled to our opinions, that's his, I'm entitled to mine. Yeah, but seeing as he works for the BBC, and they are meant to be impartial, I'm not so sure.
Well, if you're a sports presenter, you're allowed to have political views,
yeah,
isn't that the decision?
That's a bit of a weird one.
Yeah, I think we've got to be very careful, though, with this Des Lynam thing, because actually I think Des Lynam's been interviewed about a variety of other things and then got asked about the Gary Lineker and then made an opinion. Well, he's going to say something. So this
and he was very complimentary about Gary.
Yeah,
he liked him as a liked him as a broadcaster. Yeah.
Exactly. So we've got to be very careful. We're not pitting these two great broadcasters against each other.
They're not. I mean, Des is the doyen. Des is the pope of broadcasting. He is the one, if you were any good, you wanted to be like, because he was.
Well, it's not. It was, but he was also he knew his subject, but he was also very, very smooth, wasn't he? Very smooth, and very laid back. I mean, I remember Des like that. You will remember Des doing his thing, and very, very encouraging, very insightful, very warm, humorous.
See, Gary Lineker actually changed the way sports presentation happened after that, because prior to that, they were anchors, they were hosts like David Coleman, Frank Boff, Dickie Davis, Des Lynam. After Des, it was sports hosts that anchored all the programmes. You have to have competed in sport at some level or been involved in sport.
Yeah. What do you think about that, then?
I don't think it's a good idea, and I just said, particularly on football, I think it's very good to have someone who has an interest, so say someone like myself or yourself, who would be interested in the game and be asked somewhat naive or silly questions at some stage, but have the passion of a fan. You don't always have to be an expert to present certain stuff.
So Stevie Cram, he does athletics. But Steve Cram went to journalism school. So after his career, he went and studied 3 years journalism. So I think he's the exception. And I like the idea that you're professional in your job, like you two guys are professional in your job. And maybe there is something about what you're saying. Just because you're a great sportsman, why are you anchoring?
And I think the problem is, as a football fan, it can get too technical. I like being able to ask the fans questions about what the people watching at home are thinking, rather than getting too technical about this particular offside pass and, you know.
I mean, I think Gary Lineker is a very, very good presenter, but the landscape did change when he became... I used to host snooker for the BBC at that stage, and I was being replaced. They wanted to replace me with Gary Lineker.
Snooker?
Yeah, snooker, right, and pot black and things. And I was lucky that the snooker players, like as a union, got together and said, no, we like Eamonn. Actually, this is a tremendous tribute to me that they said, no, we want Eamonn to stay, and they had that power that meant that I stayed on hosting snooker, which was a great compliment. But Gary's top man. But Lynam, see, no one will ever get me to criticise Des. You know, he is... If Des speaks, you obey.
He's entitled to his opinion, absolutely, and he's speaking out.
More solo diners visiting restaurants alone.
Yes, this one really intrigued.
I don't like being in a restaurant alone.
I think you have to be really brave to go to the cinema, go to a restaurant, any of these things.
Oh, OK. Well, so I'm glad that you started that, because I was going to ask you about that. I mean, I do dine alone at lunchtimes. If I'm in London...
In a hotel, I might, you know, I'd have to. My trouble is I would be sitting and having a meal, whatever it is, and then there'd be, sure as heck, there'd be some girl It's sauce.
Lucky you.
It
You'd be
just comes up.
inundated.
And I'm just thinking, please, just let me eat my meat. You know, I'm just...
I actually, to be honest, whenever we do go out for breakfast and things, I actually am like your Rottweiler. I do have to bat people away. It does get a bit much sometimes. So he's not even being silly. It's true. Could you dine solo? I don't think I could.
Yeah, I don't mind at all. I'd rather sometimes. I think you get a bit of peace and quiet.
Yes.
But don't you end up just dining with your phone? Just reading, you know, scrolling.
No, but
That's
but
grim.
first of all,
I like to be present, enjoy my food, have great conversation.
Have a Bloody Mary or three.
And also, or
Do you know? I was in a hotel at the weekend. Do you know what the first thing on the menu, breakfast menu, was? Bloody Mary.
And did you think of me?
Of course, I think about you all the time. No.
Very good for you. Very nutritionally balanced.
Yeah,
Got like
great
tomatoes
for a
and stuff in it.
hangover.
How would you like to spend £350 to be able to dine alone? Because there's one Michelin-style restaurant where if you dine alone, you have to spend a minimum of £350 to cover the table.
Because they're charging for the table, so they're charging for 2 people.
Yeah.
But even though you're just eating one lot of food.
Yeah. Well, I mean, DP's coming out, the old Dom Perignon's coming out, isn't it? You're going to have to get your money's worth, aren't you? Hey, look at Isabel, she's loving it. Oh, look at Isabel.
If it's Dom Perignon involved, I could slum it on my own. What can I say?
Yep.
Guys, thank you. We'll go through the papers one more time just after 8:30 with Dawn and with Chris. But for now, we say see you later. Thanks very much. And we're going to get your forecast. Here's Marco Britannia.